Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Ask SAP live chat of 2019. Joining me today are Andy Bitterer and Timo Elliott, two of our evangelists from SAP. Actually, Andy is the Chief Analytics Evangelist and Timo is the Global Innovation Evangelist, but I normally trip over trying to say the both of those, so I was trying to cheat. Anyway, we are here to talk about their predictions for analytics in 2019. And we have a wide variety of topics that they're going to go through, from machine learning to AI fails to data governance and a host of other topics. So I am just going to remind you that we take questions throughout, so don't be shy. Simply type your question into the Facebook comment area and we will get to it during the live chat. If by chance we don't, we will make sure to circle back with an answer for you post live chat. And if you're catching this on replay, you can still ask us questions, so don't be shy. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Timo and Andy so we can hear all of their great predictions for 2019.
Thank you, Avery, and hello, everyone. So just quick introductions. Timo Elliott, I'm an innovation evangelist with SAP. I joined SAP through the acquisition of Business Objects, where I was the 8th employee 28 years ago. So 30 years of being passionate about data and analytics. Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Timo. Hi, everyone. Andy Bitterer here. I'm not nearly as long with SAP as Timo has been, even though we've been knowing each other for probably all the same 28 years. I joined SAP about a year and a half ago. For the most of the time, I was an analyst with Gartner, and I've been on the analytics and BI side for pretty much all of my career.
All right, so you got two of us here. We're passionate about analytics, and we put together a list of the top 10 things that we'd like to talk about. We're going to get through as much of this as we can. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions at any point through the interface. So starting off with number one, machine learning will be everywhere. It's a bit of an easy one, really, because it's already been everywhere for the last year or so. But machine learning gets real. So Andy and I are both old enough to remember when data mining was a big deal. Artificial intelligence, the term actually goes back to 1952, believe it or not, but clearly the technology and data has come together for these new automated forms of data mining to make it real. And what I like about machine learning is that it's really getting rid of some of the biggest barriers to successful BI. So being able to integrate data more intelligently, so you can start using machine learning algorithms to figure out what data matches to what data. Getting rid of the fear of the blank page. So as you open up an analysis, the SAP Analytics Cloud does a great job of this. You open it up, you say, hey, I'd like to know more about revenue. And rather than having to come up with all of the queries that might be relevant, it goes and looks at all of the underlying data and figures out what is important, the correlations, the trends, and just brings you up a full page of analytics of what you might be interested in with recommendations. And the third big area is making business intelligence easier to use than ever. So with natural language interfaces, we can finally actually ask questions using everyday business language and have a much higher hope that the machine will actually understand what we're talking about than the last time. I think I tried to launch this technology in something like 1998. And so 20 years ago, didn't really work then. The idea was great, but the technology just wasn't available. Andy, what do you think? Machine learning, going to be big?
It already is big. And in fact, I probably started a lot earlier with some of the data mining things when we programmed in Prolog and in Lisp and some of those languages that nobody even knows anymore. That was in the 80s. And obviously, we have come a long way since then. The interesting thing I thought about machine learning and some of the capabilities of it is that privately, we're using these technology all the time with some of these personal assistant, the Alexa Echo boxes and stuff like that. There's a lot of machine learning and just understanding you and I and with any kind of dialect that we're talking to this machine. And we're actually using machine learning capabilities all the time without knowing. I think that's sort of the promise also of making it everywhere, just not only on the business, but in everyday life.
Well, actually, it's interesting because that ties to, I think we can seamlessly go to the next point as well in a minute, but there's the famous set of types of analytics. I can't remember the first ones. It's descriptive analytics, then investigative analytics, something like that, and predictive analytics is one, and then the final one is prescriptive analytics. And what I always thought was fascinating about prescriptive analytics is in many ways it stops being an analytics. It sort of vanishes. It just becomes something the computer tells you what to do. Or it just goes and does it. We see a lot of this in cars, for example. Cars are stuffed full of computers. They're doing making a lot of what we used to call decisions automatically using technology. And we're starting to see the same thing inside business applications. So we've talked about the operational side of things and the analytics side of things. And I think those two are starting to come together. So that brings us to point number 2.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think we are, as you just said, we're both old enough to remember that we had the operational side of the house where we ran our applications, and we had our BI side of the house. And we had to ETL all the data from one side to the other to actually make sense of it and run reports and run dashboards and so on. And then if you learned something from the BI side, we had to go back to the operations and actually make it work or actually make the action. Now it's just one thing, right? So the analytics sits directly in the operational process. In fact, I remember this is like a told you so moment a little bit, because I remember 2003 or 2004, I was still an analyst with Meta Group at the time. I came up with a concept that I called analytical process controlling. I'm not sure whether you were at the conference then, but the idea was to actually embed analytics directly into the process and also learn from the process to actually figure out how the processes work. At the time, I came up with a concept. I called it APC. And coincidentally, these are the initial of my first names. Always had to bring in my personal side of it, obviously. But I presented it to research directors, and they just said, well, this is never going to work. Go away. So that was 15 years ago or so. And now actually we're seeing that analytics, machine learning, any of these capabilities are directly embedded into the applications. We're doing this obviously in SAP with all the analytics cloud operations that we embed into Concur and Ariba and SuccessFactors and all of the other kind of applications. And the end user isn't a BI or analytics user. They're just users, and they just happen to use some of the machine learning capabilities, the algorithms, without even knowing. And I think that's where we're going.
I think it's a constant theme, actually, of the list is we're talking about things that are not truly new. They've been good ideas for a long time, but what is new is that we can actually now execute on these ideas in ways that simply wasn't possible before. So there's always been analytics inside business applications. You've always had reporting ever since the beginning of SAP, but it was very limited because you couldn't churn through vast amounts of data in real time. New in-memory infrastructures like SAP HANA platform allowed you to do operations and analytics on exactly the same data without duplicating it. So that was a huge step forward. And now the ability to do machine learning and run algorithms in that same platform is another huge step forward because, again, not completely new. SAP has been doing optimized logistics for a long, long time with algorithms that were directly built into the applications. But now you can apply it to almost every business process, and we are. So finance, for example, is a huge opportunity for automating. So any complex, repetitive decision, of which there are up to 60 to 70% of many business processes, according to McKinsey, you can now not only automate that with machine learning, but it can be self-learning, automatically getting better over time as you use it. Sounds like science fiction, but we're already having customers doing this right now. One large chemicals company, for example, is using SAP Cash Management. It's just designed to correlate the data the invoices that you send to customers with the payment information you get from the banks. And you're going to have 2 invoices for one payment, 2 payments for one invoices. And this customer started off with, say, 70% automatic matching, and they achieved that over several years. Now, we just with a couple of weeks of work on all of the historical data, we were able to get that to 94% matching. Now, when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence, invoice matching is not the most exciting sounding area to a lot of people. It's not robots, it's not all of this fantastic vision thing they're doing. But this chemicals company was really excited because that shift from 70% to 94% represents potentially millions of dollars and time and effort spent. And that's just one example among dozens in finance and perhaps hundreds across the organization. So embedded analytics on the same data live, plus the machine learning algorithms, I honestly think is going to save billions of dollars over the coming years.
Yeah, I think that's a huge productivity gain, obviously, that the company has. Obviously, this is one of the great use cases that we always talk about, because I mean, if you're receiving tens of thousands of invoices and even more of these payments, I mean, that's just a tremendous amount of work that you would need to go manually. And even if you had some good algorithms, I mean, 94% with machine learning based kind of algorithms, I mean, that's just a huge productivity gain.
And again, I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think it's the one point that you made earlier had to do with in memory, and I think that's also the shift that we're seeing in terms of database technology. I mean, in the past, if you had to have operational applications, you were basically running on relational databases, OLTP type databases, and they were not optimized for some kind of analytic capabilities, and you always had to work on either hierarchical or column-based data stores to actually do all the analytics on the side. So you had to move data from one side to the other. And now with in-memory kind of technologies and flash-based and memory database, I mean, that just is pretty much obsolete. You just stay where you are. The data doesn't move. You run your OLTP workloads just as well as your OLAP or analytical workloads.
And what I like about these platforms, so the SAP HANA platform, for example, keeps gaining new algorithms and new capabilities. So we have the spatial algorithms are getting really advanced and people starting to use them. I remember watching you do presentations on not just how, where, what, but no, not just how, what, but where, right? Data and location is an important aspect. We can now do that in the same platform. So it's just the algorithms right there. Have you seen the differential privacy algorithms that are now built into the HANA platform?
I have not, but I mean, I'm sure you will tell us all about it.
So it's really cool. It's we should be careful not to say anonymization, because that's a very strong term. So a de-identification built into the platform. So with GDPR, for example, there are strict limits on who you can access data to without having a huge set of onerous controls in place. So these are differential privacy algorithms that do some clever statistical measures so that you can basically, it scrambles the data, but in a way that the aggregates and averages remain very close to the original. So you can actually have you can have dashboards with all of the numbers that are very, very close to the real data, but there's no way to drill down to get to the data of an individual. So it's just this lovely sidestepping of a problem that comes up from GDPR. And again, we could probably do an entire course on just that one. But the whole point is that it's in memory, it's the same platform. You can just add these algorithms and add power. All right, we have a question. So let's take the question. Can we replace the rule-based algorithm machine learning algorithms like decision tree and deep forest? I think that the bottom line you can have a go afterwards, Andy, is what's key with machine learning is that it's not the algorithms. There are absolutely algorithms that are adapted to different types of problems, but all of the modern platforms have a variety of different algorithms that you can choose from. And there are certain algorithms that are better adapted for certain types of problems. The key is obviously knowing which one is the right one at the right time, but also the more of the transparent algorithms, that's getting really important. So if you have an application that touches on people, loans to people, for example, or hiring bias, it's really important to be able to explain those decisions. In many cases, it's a compliance requirement. So there are certain types of machine learning, for example, SAP Predictive Analytics uses automated forms of traditional statistical analytics, more or less, to simplify it greatly, but it does mean that it's explainable. You can look under the covers and say, okay, here's why that score was given. You can break it down to the different factors much more easily compared to, say, something based more on deep learning or neural networks. Andy?
Yeah, I think we also need to talk about algorithm bias at this time, right? So I mean, the algorithm obviously very much depends on how you put together your training data. So algorithms need to be trained. I mean, they just don't come up with ideas all by themselves. So there's a lot of training and data preparation required. And obviously the data preparation piece in any kind of machine learning or data mining kind of process is typically taking up the most time. to clean up your data, to integrate your data, to make sure that it's sort of really rather generic and not maybe cutting out a certain either population when you're talking about people, or a certain race, or a certain kind of income level, or whatever. Religion could be anything. So in order to do that, I mean, you need to be really, really careful with your training data. Otherwise, your algorithm, even though it does exactly what you train it to do, has a bias to it. And certainly if you're trying to give out a loan, I mean, you don't want to have any, you don't want to go near any of the bias if you're a bank or something like that.
Well, and some of it's unavoidable. We'll touch on that a little bit later again, I think. Let me go to the third point, which is the rise of cloud and hybrid analytics, because, and this is related, I found, actually, I'd be interested in what you're seeing, but as I talk to customers, there's definitely been a tipping point in attitude to cloud analytics. For the longest time, people were very resistant. That's generally going away. In any new technology, there's generally a tipping point where if you're the CIO, if you adopt too early, you're running a risk of losing your job, and then you go past the tipping point, and then you're more likely to lose your job if you don't adopt the latest technologies. I think cloud analytics has got over that point. The big thing that I find has changed people's perceptions is the rise of machine learning, because conceptually people understand that the cloud-based infrastructures are just much better adapted to the kind of volumes of data and the sophistication and the speed of change that the cloud architectures provide you. And I think people are just in general over time, more and more business applications have moved to the cloud. So there's less of the data gravity problem, where people used to say, all of my data is on premise. Why are you going to go offer me, I'm going to bring it all up to the cloud just so I can analyze it again? That doesn't make sense. Now there's a much more even shift, but even balance between data that's in the business applications to the cloud and data on premise. And so having analytics in the cloud is a lot more feasible than ever before. What are you saying?
Yeah, I believe I was one of the skeptics in the first place. I mean, so when the whole Cloud BI started, when was that? Was it 7 years ago, 8 years ago? I mean, when it really kind of was a thing, right? Before that, it wasn't a thing. Everybody says, well, I mean, my data is too important for me. I'm never going to move it to the cloud. And there were certain situations where it was just not feasible in terms of volume, right? So if you're sitting on whatever so many exabytes worth of information, I mean, you're not going to move it to the cloud. I mean, just the time actually it takes to actually move it there would take forever. But the adoption rate was obviously gigantic. I mean, if you had one user and this year and you had 2 users next year, you had a 100% growth. If you had 100,000 users and you had 100,001 users, you pretty much had a 0% growth. Mm-hmm. So my view wasn't that the numbers of users was not the right metric there, but I believe that the revenue that vendors such as SAP would actually derive from cloud was very, very small, maybe 3 to 5%. And I think I was wrong. It's obviously much more now, but I mean, I think something also has changed in terms of many applications actually moving more towards the cloud, and the data is already there. So why would I move the data that sits in the cloud to my on-premises thing and to run my reports and dashboards there? So I think the shift really of applications moving towards the cloud really just opened the door for BI running in the cloud just as well.
And I think, and this brings us on to hybrid, because at the same time, it's absolutely clear that there's some data that will never go to the cloud. I mean, especially almost every company has some data that it considers the crown jewels and wants to keep close for some reason. Security is not a great reason not to move data to the cloud, I just have to say in passing, because the security in the cloud is actually better than most people. But for whatever reason, people are clearly going to have a mix for the foreseeable future. So one of the nice things about the SAP Analytics Cloud is that you have the opportunity to use cloud analytics against local data without the local data ever leaving your firewall. So you have an agent who just asks the question directly from the browser experience. So that's been a big plus, and we'll get more going forward. So just hybrid, clearly something that we're going to see more of in the future.
No, not just hybrid in terms of on-premise in the cloud, but also hybrid in terms of this is our own data, this is our external data. I mean, it could also be coming from some other data source that's just totally out of our control.
That's the other, yes, yeah, great, exactly. That the notion of it's my data to analyze has kind of gone away. You have to analyze data from all over the place. Increasingly, that data is third party or it's coming over the cloud. So again, another great reason for the rise of cloud architectures. Okay, over to you, Andy, for number 4.
Yeah, we're talking about user experience. I think we've been all subject to great user experiences with new devices and such as like iPhones, and obviously the new UIs on operating systems and so on, or how we interact with our cars, car dashboards, or TV sets. I mean, all is about having a really great user experience. On the BI side, I think we were relatively late. We always had kind of nice dashboards and stuff like that. Great pie charts and donut charts and histograms and stuff like that. They always look great. It's just that us as a user working with the tools was sometimes really, really painful. So in terms of kind of getting more adoption, I think that was the driver for many vendors over the years, that we are having now a tool, we all said, which is so easy that we are driving adoption up so everybody can use BI. And if you look year after year after year, and as an analyst, we actually did exactly that, we found that adoption of the end users in organizations, whether it's a bank or retailer or a telecom or government organization, never went beyond, I want to say, 20%. So everybody else was just not using any BI tools whatsoever. So,
but they were using the data, though, ultimately, right? Because the data came to them through PowerPoints or emails or whatever. So the notion of using has always been a bit weird.
That's okay. Fair point. I mean, I was really talking about being an active analytics user, doing analysis and drilling down and slicing and dicing information, or maybe integrating. I have this data from over there that I want to mash up with something over here. I mean, that just was not really a thing for the majority of people in any organization. Obviously, we're trying to kind of engage more with people that says, it's so easy. You don't have to know the tool. You don't have to know how to write queries. You don't have to know how to properly build a time series or a regression or any of these rather complex algorithms, maybe. So that's why things such as in Analytics Lab with Smart Assist or Smart Discovery or Smart Insight, these are all based on machine learning capabilities that you just drop your information on the canvas. This tool says, okay, thank you very much. And I'm looking through the data. I'm looking through versus are these measures, are these dimensions, and the tool with ML technology tries to figure out, okay, this is what could be a good way of visualizing that piece of information that you just given me. And then from then on, I mean, you mentioned earlier the what is it, the fear of the blank sheet of paper or something. So I mean, you don't have that blank sheet of paper anymore because the tool itself already shows you where you could start. The same with talking about experiences is we're going to talk more. I mean, I'm putting my futurist hat on. I think we'll talk a lot more to these systems, whether these BI systems or operational systems, rather than just typing on keyboards. I think keyboards are sort of arcane things that we just had to do it, from the 60s or so. But we're all talking, and talking into a system is much faster than maybe typing a query. So the same thing that we do with the Alexas and the what are all the calls, Microsoft Cortana or some of those tools. That's what we do with Copilot, right? So Copilot obviously is the Alexa for the business user. And sort of a third point is that there's a technology concept that we call Inscribe right now. So Inscribe is where you have a tablet and you basically just scribble on it, and through writing recognition, or not voice recognition, what's it called? More like image recognition. Handwriting, that's right. You basically just interact with the tool just very naturally. So you don't have, either you talk to it or you scribble on it or you cross something out and the color moves away. So some of those new experience ways are really the future, and
again, I'd emphasize that a lot of this isn't new, right? Voice interfaces we tried to do a long time ago, it just didn't work. The real-time and in-memory technologies allow much more interaction. So we have beautiful SAP digital boardroom now that's real-time data for the executives, literally at their fingertips, live from the operational systems. And it's something they've been dreaming around for 40 years. We have the ability to ask questions in the SAP Analytics Cloud platform. I saw a great project. It's for a bank. They used the SAP Conversational AI chatbot builder. So basically, the finance department got fed up with the 80% of the questions that people asked them that were just silly little questions like, what's my KPI? Do I have any headcount left? Where am I with my budget? And it was just taking up their time. So they actually took all of those questions and put them all in the chatbot. And now that chatbot takes away all of the basic stuff. Is it analytics? Not really, but you're giving people numbers and the answers to their business questions. So it kind of is as well. But it's certainly much more, it's getting the same data out to way more people easier than ever before, thanks to these new interfaces. Let me stop there and turn to a question. So we have a question on what is the roadmap for SAP Business Objects in the future? Is there going to be one or any new tool in the pipeline? So first, SAP Business Objects for client, absolutely, and Web Intelligence. So Web Intelligence, definitely not going away. We have a large and happy install base. We continue to improve the product. Future investments are mainly going into the SAP Analytics Cloud platform. Now, for more details, there is an upcoming roadmap web seminar that I'm not sure we have a date for yet, but I think it's we'll try and find the date for you and stick it as a link here. But upcoming web seminar is going to launch for the year, going over the full roadmap of exactly where we're going with what products, and that's the occasion where you'll get a lot more detail. All right, number 5. Okay, so the flip side of the user experience is the data experience. It's been the other factor that's always stopped people from being successful with analytics. It's really hard to get all of the data you need in the right formats you need to be able to ask sensible questions. So number 5 is data management and compliance gets more flexible. My take on data warehousing is that data warehousing, we always knew how to do it, at least theoretically, but real life got in the way. By the time we built what we wanted to bring all the data together, the business had moved on, or there was data that was always just too fast moving to put into a static data warehouse. So data warehouses are dead, data warehousing continues. So whether it's a data lake or a traditional data warehouse structure or the operational system or streaming third-party data, we still need to get our hands over some kind of coordinated view of what that data is. Otherwise, we can't make any business decisions. There's no magic wand. That stuff can't come completely automatically together. You're always going to have to do some work. So we have a tool, SAP Data Hub is a big new tool for us in this area that uses data orchestration to provide a single coherent view across all of that data for governance and compliance reasons, but at the same time leaves the data where it is as much as possible. So it combines the data as and when you need it using data pipelines. So if you haven't heard about technology, it's absolutely an example of this next generation of data warehousing approaches. It's had lots of different names over the past. Federated data warehousing, active data warehouses, I think, lots of others. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a virtual data warehouse also at some point.
Right.
So I agree with all the things you said. It's just that when you look into organizations, and I'm trying to be devil's advocate a little bit here, do you see organizations really coming to grips with the quality of the data as well? Because I mean, obviously that was sort of my pet peeve for about a decade, right? So you can obviously collect all the data, you can massage it, and you can put it into a data warehouse until the cows come home. If the data is wrong or not consistent or incomplete or flat out just specious, what are you going to do with it? So I think there's the other side, the more the organizational side of the house, which needs to be addressed nonstop. And I just don't hear organizations talk so much about it more. I don't think we've solved the problem.
Right.
I just think it's certainly not sexy to deal with data quality and stewardship and stuff like that. It's just that without it, I mean, we're not going anywhere.
So here's my take. So one, definitely not a sexy problem, but I think there's been some positive movement because So that the tools got a little bit more powerful, but above all, both the downsides got bigger and the upsides got bigger. So the downsides, compliance has been a huge one. So compliance from GDPR, anything touching customers and people, through to all of the different finance regulations. So there's been lots of rules in place. Any sensible company took GDPR and took that as an opportunity to clean house on anything to do with their customer data. So that was a big opportunity for companies to do what they always should have been doing because they had a nice stick. It is a way of just getting companies interested. The second, and perhaps ultimately more importantly, is let's say you want to do a machine learning project. If you have large quantities of clean data, it's actually pretty easy. You put in the algorithm, it just kind of works once you've chosen the right values, chosen the right algorithms. When it doesn't work is because you didn't have the right data quality. So there's a huge upside. Actually, some of our studies recently, we did one with Oxford Economics that showed that just 3% of companies saying they were succeeding with digital transformation. As we dug into the numbers, a big part of that was technology, and the ones that were succeeding were something like 7 times more likely to have invested in things like machine learning. I believe that's because they were the kind of companies that had spent more time investing in a proper data platform. And because they'd invested in the proper data platform, they actually had the data in the format to be able to take off and get this new value much more easily. So the problem still exists, but I think it's much more visible. There's a maturity about data. People know that their companies are valued now. You know, the stock market valuation literally is based on how well they're collecting and leveraging data. So this notion of data having value, there's been, what's the analyst's name?
Gosh, Doug Laney.
Yes, Doug Laney, and I've got a signed copy of his book. Of companies treating money like a real asset. So I think we're heading in the right direction. There's still a long way to go, though.
Yeah, his book is called Infonomics. If you haven't read it, you should pick it up.
Right.
Yeah. Little plug for Doug.
There you go. Actually, the one last thing to say about compliance is just, this is a little one. So Gartner believes that there's been the original wave of analytics was things like business objects and Cognos, sort of semantic layers reporting. Second big wave was data discovery. So started off with ClickTech and Tableau, and then SAP Lumira. And now Gartner believes we're now in the third wave, which they started calling smart data discovery. I think it's now augmented analytics, but it's basically these platforms we're talking about, mainly cloud-based, leveraging machine learning in everything they do, self-learning, much easier to use, and so on. And just talking to customers, one of the things that counted against data discovery was because a lot of those tools pulled data out of the core systems. I was talking to the HR department of a large airline company, and they'd had this massive use of data discovery tools that had been in addition to the traditional reporting. But now, because they couldn't really govern what happened to that data after it came out of the system, they were closing it down. They're saying, no, you can't do that anymore. We're now going to move to this third generation of tools so that the data stays in the system. You can still do all the discovery, but you're not taking it out and putting it in your own cubes, your own structures, and these grab it and run away with it kind of data forms.
Even though that's probably still one of the most asked questions, how can I just get to your data and just send me an extract and I do it all in my spreadsheets? I mean, right. I think that's still everywhere. But I think that kind of leads nicely into our next point here, talking about data. We're talking about data literacy, and will continue to be a big problem. And yes, it will be. Do we actually understand our data? Can we actually read data? So obviously we're generating data as if there's no tomorrow, with sensor networks and seismic data and location data, which is gigantically blowing up some of these data lakes. They call them data swamps these days, right? Mm-hmm. But the question is, are we fit as an organization to deal with that? Do we actually understand what we actually talking about? We're all looking at dashboards and reports, and we're doing analysis. But do we actually have the right culture to do that? Do we actually have the right skills? Are we organizationally fit to actually run a proper analytics program? I think that's a really big barrier to success in most organizations. You can talk to pretty much any large organization, multi-billion-dollar revenue organizations with huge market caps. You go into the BI team or so, and you think you just went back to Stone Age, literally. So I mean, there's just no sense of kind of this kind of. No, let me backtrack. There are certain exceptions to what I just said, right? So I'm not just playing it really, really bad everywhere. It's just that there are organizations that are just not smart enough to really learn about analytic capabilities. They don't train their people. They just keep the lights on the operational side, and we don't do much on the analytics side. So I would think organizations really need to kind of think hard in terms of how do we actually get some analytic use cases out of that massive amount of data that we actually have. You need to have certain level of creativity to do that. All these kind of cool use cases that you just mentioned earlier, whether it's with voice or with invoice matching, those use cases didn't fall into people's lap. They just sat around the table for weeks probably, kicked around ideas, some stupid, some smart, some really silly, but some were sticking. And I think that's sort of the approach that we've been taking with some of our customers, with some of these Leonardo centers, for example, to come up with some kind of a design thinking approach to think, what could we actually theoretically do with all the data that we have? And that's when you start kind of coming up with storyboards, with certain maybe alerts that you may want to kind of send to people, and come up with what are the certain risks that we could kind of find, what are the opportunities. And that's when you start analyzing the data that you may have, or maybe you don't have. In fact, I want to tell a quick story where it wasn't about the analytics, but about a new generation of data. I talked to a company in the Netherlands that built, they make coatings for ships, right? So your big vessels, and they do the coating so that no clams and barnacles are building up, because obviously you want to have the ship, these big vessels, sail through the water as smooth as possible. So if you're building up all these barnacles, obviously that creates drag on the ship and increases costs because you need to have more power. So there was a researcher who was really curious when the ship came back to the dock. Sometimes the ship was really clean, so the coating did seem to work. Some other time it didn't. So it says, that's strange. It's the same coating. What happened? So then they started analyzing the ship's time in the port, the routes, the temperature of the water, the rivers, the oceans, the temperatures of the water, and all sorts of things, and collected it into a gigantic database, and found out that it really depended on where was the ship, how long was it taking to actually analyze, to unload the ship or to load the ship, and so on. And they started building this big database that's now used as a really smart information for the port authority. It says, if your ship went to the Strait of Suez or some other kind of things, because there is a certain clam that kind of attaches itself to the vessel, you're not coming to my port because your clam may eat the eggs of my fish. In fact, that was the use case that they had, because something happened years ago upstream on the Mississippi because all the fish died. So I think there's new data that you can generate by having a creative approach to some of these analytical kind of or data-driven kind of decision that you need to make. And these things don't just fall from the sky. You need to sit down with your creative people from the various sides of business, and that's when you come with some really, really cool use cases that really have a big, big impact for you or the organization or even the whole planet.
Absolutely. I mean, to answer your question, is data literacy is bad in general. People look at data in very unsophisticated ways. We've done a series of studies that shows that it's not based on level. Executives and front-end workers tend to make fairly simple leaps of imagination sometimes from limited sets of data to the answers. So there's absolutely, the answer is training and expertise and greater awareness. People should spend absolutely as much money on training and human skills and organization and incentives, a huge part of it, as they do on the technology itself. All too often people concentrate on the technology, not how people are going to use it, but it absolutely takes people to turn data into information, into action, into profits. So 100% agree. I do hope that machine learning can potentially help with some of this, in that it can point out, so for example, in the SAP Analytics Cloud, you look at a value and then it drills down and says, hey, these are the things that are affecting this value most. But ultimately, it can't replace domain expertise. The context of what's happening is still something that's uniquely human, and we can add. All right, we got to move on. There was a question about version control of solutions deployed to production environments. Are there any improvements for future generation of analytics and BI tools? So quickly, I think the answer is yes. I think this is part of something we'll talk about in a minute, the end-to-end decision-making experience. Notably, having it cloud-based is a huge leap forward. The big benefit of cloud is that you can update and improve stuff faster. We can roll out improvements every quarter, every month, rather than having to wait, a yearly basis for stuff to get deployed. So there's the improvement of the solution over time. We can just add things like spatial or differential privacy, just turn up in the product one day. And then there's the management of a solution from small, like one person doing some investigation, through to making it something that's useful on the company scale. Again, having it all in the cloud allows you to more easily and flexibly control that growing use case over time. All right, so let's go back to where we are. Number 7. Brings on from the data literacy in some levels. There will be increasing number of AI fails. So I like saying that algorithms are psychopaths. They can be very capable. It's estimated that some CEOs are sociopaths, but they don't really know what they're doing. They have no notion of the human condition, and because data literacy can be low and people are putting in solutions from a technology point of view without thinking of the effects, we are going to see some bad problems due to AI. Again, any powerful technology can be misused. The problem with AI is that it can be misused blindly. So we've talked about the problem of bias. Machine learning is more than happy to take any existing bias you have in your data and replicate it and happily duplicate it in the future. But also, oh gosh, there was another form I was going to talk about. Oh yes, so things like, it makes it much easier to do things like surveillance of people, right? To bring together complex, disparate data sets so that you can really get a total view of people's lifestyle. That is now possible because of these new technologies. That does not mean it's a good idea. And unfortunately, most legislation obviously takes a while to adapt to the realities of technology. Clearly, all of the laws are behind. I think we're better off in Europe than some places in the world with GDPR and so on. But unfortunately, I think we're going to see more and more high-profile misuses of this technology before we see improvements. Oh, the other thing I'd like about artificial intelligence, I stumbled across some great examples. So machine learning algorithms are basically, they're trying to game the system. You set it up with data and you set it up with rules to follow. So just like, salespeople or any other system where you have very strict KPIs, you can guarantee that somebody intelligent will start gaming that system in ways that you didn't necessarily think about. And it turns out that algorithms do exactly that. They cheat, basically. If you've given them the slightest possibility to cheat to get to the right answer, then they do that because they don't know what they're doing. So that leads to some amusing situations in video games and other places. I have to try and find that link and send it to everybody. Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you wrapped it up very nicely. But I used to say not everything what's technically possible is also ethically defensible, right? So I mean, you can use any kind of algorithm to do bad things. You could do any tool to do bad things. And I think that's sort of the danger that we're running into, and you can see that in today's life where election will be interfered with. I mean, there's certain things that are just not. Shouldn't be done, right? But there's always crooks out there, and they will be using AI to do bad things. And it's just that maybe there's a need in the legislative to actually come up with kind of laws, what to do and what not to do. And if you do, I mean, there is consequences. I think I'm obviously not a lawyer. It's just that I think there is very little understanding, either in the EU or otherwise, in terms of what's actually possible technically.
It's going to be really hard to write those laws. We're actually, and each company should have ethicists. As if they're doing anything that touches on human beings, they should take ethics into account and have some sort of board of review. That's what we're doing at SAP. We have executive group they're devoted to ethics as we roll out machine learning and everything we do. And that's supplemented by an external ethics council where we've invited professors of ethics and other experts to come and give a completely sort of neutral third-party view to make sure that we're doing the right things. So I'd recommend every company should have something like that within their structure in the back of their minds, because you will run into this as you start using this out with your customers. All right, we've got to keep moving. Number 8, Andy, I'll hand it over to you. The emergence of end-to-end decision-making platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on this a little bit already, where we talked about this one platform. You know, over the year from SAP, we're talking about HANA, where you actually run all your data management capabilities, all your algorithms and your analytics directly in the platform. So it's not just here's where we store, here's where we compute. I mean, it's just one thing, right? Obviously, we need to have an idea, obviously, of do we actually also understand the information that we are storing, and do we actually have a combined sense of what the semantics are, right? So if you and I were having a discussion in terms of running a certain report, a certain analysis, I would argue that we probably come to a point where we're not totally sure where we're talking about the same thing. So when we talk about dictionaries in the past or metadata management, and then they're called glossaries. I mean, I think the problem is always the same, is that whether we're storing the data or analyzing data, we still need to figure out, is this what we actually think it is? And I think that's when, in the past or to this day, we're talking about, the business objects universes that actually describe the world in one way that everybody uses sort of the same definitions. If we're not having these kind of semantic layers, or semantic glue, basically between the data management and the analytics, we're sort of opening the doors to all sort of interpretation. So it's not that we're analyzing, we're interpreting what that revenue metric may mean. In fact, we could do a test. I invite everybody here on the call to send me an email. Andreas.bitter@sap.com is my email. I'm hoping that we don't have 1,000 or 2,000 listeners today, because otherwise my inbox flows over. But if you would send me an email that describes how you would expect revenue to be calculated. If I'm sending you a report that says revenue is X, right? $50 million, euros, rubles, whatever. So that's your revenue. What would you expect that revenue to be calculated? Obviously, there's income, and there's cost, and there's taxes, and there's returns. And how would you expect that to be calculated? Send it to me. I'll collect them all. I basically write up a little report, or put it back on the Facebook page to show you that we are talking about the revenue, or any other metrics, or a margin, or a head count, or any of these other kind of metrics that are always used by everybody, but everybody has a different view of what that means. As long as we are in that situation, we are kind of interpreting somebody else's kind of definition. I think we need to actually really clamp down on a certain dictionary, a glossary that says this is what this is across the board or across the organization. And I think if you wanted to send me an email, I'd be happy to kind of do that test. In fact, I'm more testing my own theory that I believe that we're not having one definition, but we're having maybe a few dozen or maybe 100.
Also, this notion of an end-to-end, I think, in my mind, it also covers this notion that we talked about, where the embedded analytics. So if you have operational data, it shouldn't be completely separate from your analytics system. That makes no sense anymore. It really should be. So one of the nice things that about SAP Analytics Cloud that we're doing is that it is the default solution for the cloud-based applications, everything SAP is going forward. So S4HANA, the digital core, SuccessFactors, Concur, the analytics that you get within those tools is the SAP Analytics platform. So it's just the seamless whole. And there's also the notion of analytics and then doing something about it. So being able to take action, either directly in an operational system, some of the prescriptive analytics we talked about with machine learning, or it could be finance and planning. It's like, okay, we know that we need to change something. Again, we've got finance and planning and goals directly built into exactly the same system. So it's just a seamless whole. All right,
sorry, Timo. Yeah. To that point, I think that's very important to point out that in the past we had a BI tool, we had a predictive tool, and we had a planning tool, and we had to move data from one to the other. You started a report, and you said, now we need to plan for next year, and then you had to move the data back or say, does the plan make sense, and how does a prediction work? Now it's just one, right? So it's the same data, it's the same platform. So you can start in any kind of workflow, from reporting to dashboarding to planning to predictive, back to reporting, back to planning. So I think that's the beauty of Analytics Cloud. That needs to be.
And again, the new architectures make it much easier. So you can do, you can simulate the likely result of different business decisions before you make your choice. Yep. Okay, number 9. AI and machine learning will make analytics more human. I like this one because ultimately, I believe that there's a lot of discussion about how machine learning will take over people's jobs. So clearly, some of that is happening, but at the same time, I think the early feedback, at least, is that machine learning is getting rid of parts of people's jobs. So it's displacing work rather than replacing work, and it's typically getting rid of the most boring, repetitive parts of people's jobs, especially in things like finance. So people are actually welcoming this because it means that they have more time to do more interesting, more strategic work. And ultimately, we tend to pay some types of people lots of money to act like computers today, right? Because of people's ability to sort of complex working of numbers. That's a little bit crazy. We should be rewarding people for doing things that are truly human. And especially in the era of digital transformation, creativity and leadership and flexibility, these are all things that are absolutely essential. And I think people with those skills will thrive in the future. So if anything, people ask me, like, what should my son or daughter study at college? And I'm happy to recommend history or the classics or anything that gives them the notion of human beings, how they behave, how they've done so in the past, how they're likely to behave in the future, because I think that's ultimately what is going to be most useful and rewarding.
Well, I have a slightly different view on that, because I mean, you mentioned that yes, it will take away the job of some people, but you mentioned finance people. Yes, I mean there may be some really boring tasks if you're in the finance department, but I'm thinking there's a social aspect to that. So when as a parent, I mean your children don't kind of think that school is important. It says you'll be flipping burgers for the rest of your life. Imagine that. The burger flipper, it's actually called Flippy, right? I mean, that takes away sort of the low-level kind of jobs. Here in my house, I mean, I don't have a housekeeper that kind of vacuums. That's done by a robot. I don't mow my lawn anymore. That's done by a robot. In fact, I mean, here in Hamburg, where I live, I mean, even the garbage collections are done by half robotic kind of vehicles. There's nobody sitting in the back or standing in the back anymore. It's just an arm picks up the trash can, throws them back, and keeps driving. So I think there are certain jobs, and these are obviously not finance jobs, but these are sort of the repetitive, you could argue, boring or low-skilled labor kind of jobs that are all going away. That's my view.
Well, but so one thing I say is we're really good at figuring out the jobs that will vanish. We're much worse at imagining the jobs that will be created. And the one thing I would absolutely emphasize is the machine learning and these new capabilities, these new technologies allowed people to do jobs that they would otherwise not be qualified for. So the analogy I sometimes use is, imagine way back when, if you needed to work in a store, a shop, you would have to be able to do arithmetic. You'd have to total up the cost of everything that somebody was purchasing so that you could charge them the right amount. An automatic till came along so that you could hire people to work in stores based on their service skills rather than their ability to do mental arithmetic. I worked in a pub when I was 18, I remember, in the UK, and in the UK, people order in rounds, so that you literally have 10 drinks and a packet of crisps, and it was really hard to add all of that in real time. Now they do it on a machine; it's much easier. And I saw a wonderful example. There's a cafe, a restaurant in Japan, I think it was, or China, and they've got basically robots that are doing the serving. and they're being controlled by people that are otherwise confined to their beds. So disabled people that are handling all of the voice and the interaction aspects while the robots do the serving. So it's just an amazing example of how these people that wouldn't otherwise have been able to do anything like this kind of job can now do so thanks to these new technologies. But we have to move on. So I think the bottom line is that, and Gartner agrees, ultimately these technologies will create more new jobs than old jobs disappear. Now, that doesn't mean there's not disruption, and there's some jobs that will be negatively impacted. Both of us are Europeans. We believe in this state stepping in and helping people that has happened to. We won't go there. All right, last point. Analytics and the experience economy. So this is a relatively new theme for SAP. We've announced the intention to acquire a company called Qualtrics. They're the world leader in experience management. What is experience management? It's basically augmented all of the traditional data that we have gathered with our operational systems. So, number-based stuff with experience data. Now, we've talked about it a little bit in the past with some sorts of unstructured data, but this is truly focused on customer experiences and people experiences. And we believe this is a big opportunity for the future. In an era of digital transparency, your prospects can find out the real worth of your products and services with just a few clicks from your existing customers. Your product is your marketing. Your customer experience is your marketing. Think about hotels. So the last time you went to go and choose a hotel, I guarantee you went to somewhere like TripAdvisor to check it out. Which hotel should I go? Look at what people thought about it, their subjective experience. So Qualtrics provides some fantastic tools to collect and analyze that subjective experience, obviously augmented with the deep expertise of SAP and our analytic systems with all of that operational data. So we have O data, as it's called, operational data, with X data, experience data, coming together to truly optimize the people experience. So that could be the customer experience. Again, it's the differentiator. Experience matters. But it could also be the user experience. SAP has not always been known for its delightful customer experiences from a user point of view over the years. That's already changed massively. If you haven't seen the latest Fiori-based S4 systems, it's a delight to use. But the ability to analyze that in much finer grained detail and augment it and change it flexibly on the fly, use machine learning perhaps to improve automatically over time, that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that also includes some of these kind of maybe configurators that you have on the websites and so on. I think there's a certain opportunity to kind of really delight the user rather than just giving them the information and figuring out what they really want.
So that was our top 10, and Avery is here with the big hook to drag us off screen.
Thank you, Andy and Timo. I really enjoyed that. There's so many great sound bites. I really like the
algorithms are psychopaths. That's always a favorite.
That's my favorite, but I predicted that the AI fails one would be my favorite. I also wanted to touch on the roadmap webinar you mentioned earlier, Timo. It's actually going to be our next Ask SAP community call, which is scheduled for February 28th. Registration opens tomorrow, and you can watch at SAP Analytics on Twitter. We will be promoting it crazy. We will be promoting it here on our Facebook page as well, so you'll get the registration link there. And I wanted to close out, because we have a couple of minutes, and ask each of you, it's a surprise question, they didn't know I was going to ask them, what are you guys most excited about for 2019?
Most what about, sorry?
Most excited about. What are you interested in seeing unfold?
I'm excited to see all of the great photographs that Andy is going to post to Instagram. So those of you who don't know, Andy is a strong, very good semi-professional photographer. So check out, what's your website?
It's andybitter.com.
There you go.
Yeah, he does have really good.
Apart from that, honestly, machine learning If people haven't already invested in machine learning as part of their analytics, it really does change everything.
I'm excited about voice. I used to be one of the very early adopters of voice technology and talking to systems. It was really, really painful back in the, I guess, mid-90s, where you had to kind of train the system for hours before it actually recognized your voice. And I think we'll see a lot of kind of voice interaction with applications in the future. And I think that's really, really cool.
Awesome. So thank you to both of you for participating. And thanks to everyone who joined us today and asked questions. We love it when you join the conversation with us. And next month, our Ask SAP live chat will be with Harris Logic, and they're going to talk about how they use predictive analytics to reduce suicide rates and other good things. So make sure to join us then. In the meantime, have a great day or evening, depending on where you're at. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.